Well, actually, I won't get to it straight away because I was going to bring up the Australians for Better Government, but I might bring that up when we have Kevin on. So I'll just finish up by letting you know about a rally that's going to come in February in Canberra at Parliament House. It's called the Freedom Rally 2025. It will be on Parliament House lawn in Canberra on Saturday, February 8th at 10 a.m. There's going to be more details coming out about this rally in the next few weeks. I'll let you know about the rally. If you do want to find out more, you can also head to commandingthenarrative.com. I'll put all the information up there as we hear it and as we learn it. But if we can get a big turnout to the rally, I think it will be significant. We had one last year, the Reckless Renewables Rally, organised by the same group, which I'm also a part of, the National Rational Energy Network. And we had a great turnout there. We're hoping for a better turnout this time, not just focused on energy this time, but focused on all the issues that are plaguing us at the hands of government, which I'm sure we're going to be talking about today with my very special guest, returning once again, Mr. Kevin Loughrey. How are you today, Kevin?
I'm terrific. Thank you very much, Stephen. We're at the Horsham Sport and Community Centre. Meals here are fantastic. Staff are really friendly, and I'm just sort of sitting away from people. Hopefully, the sound's pretty good for you. There'll be a bit of talking and activity in the background. But otherwise, we're on a road trip, so we're having a great time.
No, I think people can understand that, Kevin, and it's not too bad. So that's not a problem. You're hitting the roads already. I think that's going to be a big part of your 2025, isn't it? Traveling around.
It is. Yeah.
Message.
Well, we're sort of twixt and tween. I'm not really sure whether to go for the Senate, whether to go for the seat of Richmond, or whether simply to devote myself for Australians for a better government and forgo the other stuff. Whatever, I'm looking for a platform that you and I can spread the ideas and get people thinking that maybe we need to change the way that we are governed, especially the way that we conduct our elections. And that, in fact, is going to be one of the topics, which we will speak about today. So moving on with that, the problem as I see it at this moment, we have a system which requires compulsory voting. And to put everybody at rest, I actually believe that compulsory voting, having looked at the pros and the cons, compulsory voting is the best system. That it is a civic duty that everybody, just like national service, if the country were under threat, there's nothing more threatening to your prosperity and happiness than a poor government. And so it's necessary that we do have compulsory voting, and compulsory voting, to some extent, reduces the effect that money will have on the outcome of an election. Once again, we, the Australian people, don't want to be ruled by a wealthy elite. So, but the big disadvantage of compulsory voting is that there is a sizable group of people within our community who are uninterested, and they're not necessarily bad people. It's just that they've got a whole lot of other stuff that they have to contend with in their life, like raising a family and so forth, or they just feel, look, really, this isn't my bailiwick. I don't know much about politics. So if we were to organise our elections so as to nullify the effect of the uninterested voter, we would then hopefully have a lot of people or we would have the greater majority of people who are voting actually making a discerning choice. In other words, they would look at the politicians that were seeking or wannabe politicians that are seeking election, and they would work out which ones they should really vote for. At present, that's not the case. At least 20% of the people are affected by how to vote leaflets, which are thrust into their hand a couple of minutes before they enter the polling booth. Our problem really stems from the problems that you and I are concerned about, even like the Mad Bill, the business of climate change, which is one huge scam, the terrific atrocities that were inflicted upon us during COVID. They're all the result of having poor quality people in Parliament with far too much power over us. And on top of that, we have constitutions at territory, state and federal level, which were never constructed with an eye to protecting us from bad government. They were simply there as a means of defining the nature of the government that we would all have to suffer under. They were constructed, the first one was the New South Wales Constitution Act of 1855, constructed by Governor Gipps and Governor Fitzroy with the help of wealthy elites, William Wentworth and John MacArthur. So our system of democracy has a very poor genealogy right from the very beginning. And we really need now to be thinking about a Federation Mark II. The way that you can nullify the effect of the uninterested voter is firstly that you jumble up all the names on the ballot paper. You do not present sorry,
Kevin,
mate, go on.
You're jumping way ahead.
Well, I thought we spend 10 minutes on this and then move into another area, but go for it, Stephen.
Well, we've got your presentation here that I do want to bring up because it's got all the...
Oh, okay.
Yep. But before we get into that, you basically laid the groundwork of why we started the Australians for Better Government.
Yes.
So we want to encourage everyone to go to the website. Now, it's australiansforbetter.com. Head to the website. There's a lot of information on there already. We are going to be adding a lot more information. It's a very complex issue. What we're really standing for. Kevin's already done a lot of information, a lot of back work, as we'll find out on this podcast today and other podcasts that no doubt the audience have already watched. So the website's building, but we really want you to go there to sign up to be members. Now, at the moment, it's free. So if you hit the join button, you'll get to this page and you can find all the membership options. You can donate if you wish. The standard membership's currently free, and there's also a VIP membership if you really want to turbocharge what we're doing. But I don't know if this is going to stay free forever, so jump on it now. I've been really encouraged by people signing up already. So it's been tremendously positive so far. But Kevin, why should people join? I mean, my answer is the more people that we can get behind us, then when we go towards lobbying politicians, speaking to politicians, or hosting events, ultimately we do want to move to a people's constitutional convention. The more people that we can get involved and be members of Australians for Better Government, the more powerful we will be, or the more influence that we can have. Do you agree with that sentiment?
Oh, absolutely. And look, the very first Commonwealth Constitution was constructed in a manner not unlike what you're talking about, but within the limitations of the fact that people had to travel around on horseback or by ship to travel any sort of distance. And now with the internet and so forth, we can get a lot of people involved in this. The fact of the matter is that the politicians are unlikely to want to change things. They're very happy with the status quo. After all, they are the beneficiaries of the present situation. And you'll find, as I have, that very few politicians want to do anything where they think that there's an element of risk. And the way that you can convince politicians that there isn't an element of risk is have a huge following. So, look, my wish is for us to attract around about 10 million people to become members of this movement. And when you think about it, if everybody were to put $10 into the pot, we'd have $100 million, and that would buy us an awful lot of publicity, and we'd be able to really get this system going. We don't need a lot of money from people. We just need a lot of people with a little money, each of them making a small contribution. And really, we've got to get those numbers because, believe me, the politicians will not move unless we do have those numbers.
And the main point of the whole movement is that we're relying on politicians to grant us our freedoms. We're not having the conversation ourselves. We need a group where the people can drive the change in this country politically. And that's what we're hoping to achieve with Australians for Better Government. And as Kevin alluded to, the more people that we have a part of this, the more influence that we will have. So it's incredibly important for people that are interested in this to jump on it and join. Head to the website australiansforbetter.com, hit the join button and come along this journey with us. It's going to be very exciting, I'm sure. I also want to let people know that the link to StreamYard is in the chat right now if you want to call in and ask us a question. Maybe you have a question about Australians for Better Government. Maybe you want to know how you can get involved, or maybe you just want to find out more about what we hope to achieve. So the link's there. Don't hesitate. Richard Storch is in the chat, Kevin. He says, run for Richmond, Kevin.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you very much. Look, I'd like to just emphasise something else, and that is that we are a-party political. That is to say, although we're orientated towards the political system, any person from any political party will find what we're talking about attractive if they are a patriot of this country and if they want what is best for their children, grandchildren and their successors. I think any reasonable person would agree that the higher the quality of people in Parliament, the more probability there is of them making good decisions. And so right at the very beginning, we need to look at our system of election because I believe it is clearly failing us. We do not have high quality people in our Parliament at this moment, and we can do something to fix that. So the very first thing I think we ought to do is look at how we run our elections and get sufficient public pressure on our politicians for them to change the way that we presently conduct our elections.
Definitely. Now, we have a presentation that you have made. It's about improving the vote, which is a big part of what we want to do with Australians for better government. So let's bring the presentation up now and you can start moving your way through it.
And we'll be pretty quick in this too. This just basically goes through all of the things which have gone wrong since 1855 to the present day. People will be very interested to see that minimum wage is one of them. Within our constitution, there was a guarantee that if the Commonwealth took any property off you, they would recompense you justly for that property. In terms of an employer, their profit is their property, and by the government interposing itself between the employer and the employee, there is effectively a theft of property. If the government's concerned about the social standing of an employee, then the taxpayer should be the one who pays for it, not employers. And minimum wage has done enormous damage to our economy. Other things relate to changes which occurred, which gave rise to the Aboriginal industry and so forth. They're all linked up there. Could we have next slide? Yep. And so Australia, I think most people will agree with this after COVID, that we're on a dangerous path. And this is directly the result of poor quality political candidates being selected to stand for election, which I've already covered. And that's combined with poorly conducted elections leading to poor quality parliamentarians who have far too much power because of an inadequate separation between the legislature, judiciary and the executive branches of government. Now, that's something that most Australians have never pondered upon, but the Americans worked it out. And that is a reality, that you do not want politicians to be able to move too quickly. Every piece of legislation is dangerous to your liberty. And as a consequence, you want those politicians to debate it exhaustively before a decision is made to pass a particular piece of legislation. And lastly, we move to our constitution, which I've already dealt with before, all of which come from effectively the Constitution of New South Wales, passed in the British Parliament in 1855. And the people who formed the Constitution of the Commonwealth of Australia, now I've now obtained a huge book of over 1,000 pages, which are annotations that actually goes through all of the minutes of the meetings leading up to the Constitution of the Commonwealth of Australia. There was very, very little effort made or consideration given to protecting the rights of citizens and restricting the power of our government to do long-lasting harm. The Americans, on the other hand, had just come through a war of independence, so there was within their number a general dislike for power and for government, and their constitution goes a long way further to protecting the rights of citizens and restricting the power of their politicians. Next slide. Okay, so summarising, the way that we can get a better system of democracy is firstly improve the quality of our candidates standing for election, and I'll leave fertile minds to ponder how we might be able to do that. The next one is improve how elections are conducted. Next, we have to reform our system of government to ensure that there's a proper separation between the three branches of government. Now, my suggestion is that the Governor-General has to be popularly elected, and the Governor-General has to run the public service. We need to also elect the Attorney-General, and we must mandate that the Attorney-General has never been part of the judiciary, of the judicial system. And lastly, we need to reform our constitutions. Now, one of the things which may resonate with a number of Australians is that we should have in our constitution that no politician can sell off any sizable public asset. Somebody has said that libertarians wouldn't like that. I disagree. Libertarians are all about giving the power to the people. And the last thing you want to do is delegate your power to a bunch of politicians, I can assure you.
Can I just cut in and bring up,
of course,
go back to your point about the separation of powers, because we've talked about this in the past, but I just want to make the point that in Chapter 2 of the Australian Constitution, it details the executive, and the Governor-General is meant to be the head of the executive as the Crown's representative. Now, there's no mention of the Prime Minister. There's no mention of specific members of Parliament. It does say that the Governor-General can select from members of Parliament, but the Governor-General should be running the executive branch, and that's where the separation is.
That's right.
The Prime Minister is the head of the legislature, of the Parliament, and the Governor-General is the head of the executive, and there should be that clear separation. As it is now, the Governor-General just goes to the Prime Minister and says, who do you want to be part of the executive? And basically, the Prime Minister with his or her ministers runs the executive, which is not a clear separation.
Exactly. And if I can just correct you on one thing, the Prime Minister is not the head of the legislature. The Speaker of the House is. Okay. And the Speaker of the House's role should be simply one of organisation and moderation, e.g. that when people get out of hand, the Speaker of the House has the power with the Sergeant-at-Arms to evict them out of the House.
What I should have said was that the Prime Minister is the head of the government.
Yeah, at this moment, and really shouldn't be. Queen Victoria and previous monarchs used that simply as a convenient means of being able to handle the House of Commons. But in this day and age, there is no need for us to have a Prime Minister, and there's definitely no need for us to have a cabinet. The sole role of the people in the legislature should be to represent their constituents. The way that the legislature controls the executive is that the legislature has to pass appropriation bills 1 and 2. And without those, the executive cannot do anything. Basically the public service doesn't get paid. So that's where the legislature controls the executive. Now, the legislature then passes acts which indicate what the legislature want the Governor-General or the Governor to achieve. And they expect that the Governor or Governor-General will use the money which has been appropriated to them wisely and in a most cost-efficient fashion. Now, the problem we face is often people end up as governors who are ex-politicians who have never actually run a business and are not business savvy at all. And in fact, they have leanings back into the legislature. So if you're going to vote for a governor or a Governor-General, the determinant should really be, would you trust this person to run your business? And if the answer is yes, then that's who you should vote for. You do not vote for a politician if you are electing a governor. You vote for a politician when you're electing your representative because you want that person to represent you in the most articulate and adroit fashion possible.
All right, let's get back to the slides. So we're pretty much finished up with this one. So where to start?
Well, how we might improve the system by which eligible citizens vote within the Commonwealth of Australia at council, territory, state and federal level. That's where we really got to start. And we should, as Australians, demand that all elections meet a certain standard without going terribly into the detail. But we require that they must meet a certain standard. For example, we require that all voters must vote secretly. Another thing, if we are talking about nullifying the uninterested voter, the way that you do this is that you jumble up the names on the ballot. so that every ballot presents the candidates in a different order. That gets rid of the donkey voter. To further get rid of the uninterested voter, you ban the handing out of how to vote leaflets at the polling booth, because if someone can be convinced 3 minutes before they cast their vote how they're going to vote, they've given no thought to it at all. Another thing, this is showing you how you can jumble up the names on a ballot paper. Now, you'll notice that each person appears in a different column there, and even when their names are jumbled around, they are still in the same column. And that makes it very easy for you to mark the ballots, to count the ballots. If you get rid of how to vote cards, then the person has to know who they're voting for, or the randomness of the ballot will nullify their vote. Another thing you should do is that there should not be a political party mentioned on the ballot. Once again, if they don't know to which party each of the candidates belong to, they haven't given any thought to voting, and you do not want their vote to count. You want all of those people who have given a lot of thought to this issue to have their votes counted, and you don't want the person who is complacent, apathetic, and turned up on the day simply because they would be fined otherwise.
And people are meant to vote for the candidate, not the party, so that makes sense.
Exactly, and that's why you get rid of the party off the thing, and that forces them then to go back and look at each of the candidates. Now, there are other things we could do as well to help the public become more important, and that is, that somebody just mentioned pre-polling. Pre-polling shouldn't be allowed because you want everybody to be as informed as is humanly possible about each candidate and what they stand for. And if the campaign has not run its full course, then by definition, they are not fully informed. So voting should happen on one day. If people can't get to the polling booth on that day, we do have a system of absentee voting, and that system is a little inconvenient. So it more or less makes sure that only those people who genuinely cannot get to the polling booth on the day go for an absentee vote. And that improves the quality of your election. But I was also going to say that we have to make it really easy for electors to be able to learn about the candidates, and that's where the electoral commissions could play a vital role. They could have a web page where everybody who is running for a particular election, say for a particular electorate or for the state in the case of senators, where all of the candidates are listed. And when you click on a candidate, it would then take you to that candidate's web page, and you could study how, what this candidate stands for and so forth, so that in your own time you can make up a decision as to who you're going to vote for. And then in anonymity, using a VPN, you could create your own how to vote aid memoir, which you take along to the polling booth, either on your phone or on a piece of paper, however you wish to do it. So there's an example also where we then make sure that when people are casting a vote, they are better informed than what they are now. As an inducement for them to go to the Electoral Commission, it would also be a good idea if we had then an express lane. So anybody who had made up their own how to vote card would be entitled to join the express lane, and they would be processed much faster at the polling booths. That brings me to another point. We can greatly improve the way that we presently process our voters, and we could be much tighter on ensuring that people do not vote twice and that the person standing there is actually the person who is on the voter roll. So there's a lot of room all over for improvement.
I want to make a couple of points before we move on. James says, why not get rid of compulsory voting? We discussed that a little bit in the beginning.
Yeah, I'm happy to cover it again.
This is just
there are a number of reasons. The first is that if you say, look, voting is compulsory, it will cause people to become more politically aware. They have to go and vote. So a lot of people who would otherwise not will take some time to look into what's happening, who's running for election and so forth. But importantly, it reduces or nullifies the effect that money will have in determining who gets elected. If you have optional voting, then a lot of money has to be spent to get people out of their houses down to the polling booth to vote. And that, as I say to you, that is the last thing you want to have happen. You also don't want you don't want people going to vote who are roused out of their houses by large organisations like unions. And I say here, they say, under the present system, uninterested, apathetic, lazy, in some cases immature voters influenced by a Marxist education system, media and political parties working for the globalist elite now determine who gets to govern. What could possibly go wrong? And that's what this is all about. This reform is all about.
Yes. So we're jumping around a bit, but we'll probably put this presentation up on the website at some point. But what's interesting about the Australians for Better Government is that there's an element of discussion in this group, and there's points that Kevin
Absolutely.
and I disagree on as well. One of the points I might disagree with you on is this voting age. You're proposing to lift it to 25. Now, my view on that is if we're sending people to war at the age of 18, and you're going to be probably the best person to ask this question to because you're a lieutenant colonel. We're sending people to war at 18, but then telling them when they come back from duty that they're still not able to vote. Don't you think that's incredibly unfair?
Absolutely, it's unfair. And, there are some countries that say that nobody can serve in combat until they're 25 years of age. There are actually countries in the world which have that as their rule, and that is a rule that I would invoke. If you were an enlisted man who had volunteered, and only if you volunteered could you be sent to a war zone. Now, most Australians don't realise that until you turn 21 as a national serviceman, you could not go to Vietnam. If, on the other hand, you had, as I did, joined the army at the age of 17, after I'd done my basic training, I could, if I volunteered, go to Vietnam. So I'm simply saying, yes, I'm in total agreement with you, Stephen, that it's not right that a person should be denied the right to vote and be sent off to war by compulsion. But I've got another little lolly in the sack to induce people, and that is that there shouldn't be any taxation without representation. And in other words, unless you can vote, you shouldn't be taxed. And I say, yes, I agree emphatically with that as well. So anybody up to the age of 25 would enjoy a tax-free holiday. Doesn't matter what they earn, they do not get taxed. They obviously will pay GST, but I'm talking about income tax. So I'm saying to all of the people out there who are under the age of 25, listen, two things. Firstly, you won't be sent to a war zone until you're 25 if we're in dire straits. And secondly, that you will not be taxed until you can vote. And that's a guarantee. So whenever you're eligible to vote, then and only then will you be paying tax.
Well, governments are not going to like that because they're going to need those younger taxpayers to prop up the pension system for the elderly.
Well, the reality is that most people don't pay a lot of tax before they're 25 years of age. They are, in fact, on the government tit. And that's a fact. They're either going to university or they could be doing an apprenticeship or whatever, or they're on the dole. But they're people under the age of 25 pay very little tax compared to those people over that age.
We've got a couple
and that
of
might also, by the way, help them. If I can just leap in there, I just had this sudden thought. That might actually be good for our economy as well, because not being burdened by tax, young people would be better positioned to start their own business and get things rolling. So good luck to them.
A deposit for a house, possibly.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, actually, I have other ideas, by the way. I'm all for that as well. But I have ideas by which we could reduce the cost of a house of land. And when I say land, I'm talking of something in the order of 800 square meters and a modest three-bedroom house for $200,000.
Be careful, because this podcast will become 3 hours if we start going.
Yeah. No, of course. But
yeah, we will discuss that.
I'm suitably, yes. Okay.
Yeah. So a couple of comments. Both Tony and Richard agree that it should be an age of 21 to vote. Richard's saying simple solution, voting age of 21, or you are a taxpayer. But James says, didn't young people overwhelmingly vote for Trump and reform and populist parties in Europe?
I don't think so. My experience at the polling booth is that anybody under the age of 30 was voting Green. That's been my experience. But maybe that's the electorates I'm in.
I think it was Generation X, which is my generation and a little bit younger. So I guess 30s and above, 40s. They were the younger ones than that. Yeah, as you said, they're straight out of university. They're voting along Marxist lines and leftist lines. That sort of thing. I mean, there is a movement growing as well, because there's a lot of rebellion taking place. A lot of younger people, particularly men, are rebelling against their teachers and their lecturers and all this woke garbage that they're being confronted with. But that'd be anyway.
Look, I've got another thing I'd like to inject there as well, and that is, first, obviously, the reason I'm suggesting 25 is that most psychologists agree that the human brain is not fully mature until it's around 25, going 30. By the way, 25 is the lower part of it. A 21-year-old is not mature. And the second thing is that if you did do this, then it would make voting important to young people. In other words, it would be a passage of right. It would be something that they look forward to and say, yes, this is now I'm considered by the community to be an adult, and I've got to take this very seriously, and that's got to improve the quality of our vote. If you get something really easily, you just take it for granted. But if it's something that's really special, then you say, yeah, this is really important. I'm being given the right to vote, and I should value it, treasure it, and we should.